guys, this is the case for the resurrection of Jesus, part 3. Now, what I did in part 2 was I compellingly showed that the crucifixion, burial, empty tomb, and the appearances of Jesus were actual historical facts. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is for a few minutes, going to discuss the implausibility of naturalistic explanations that attempt to explain the empty tomb and the appearances. And then for most of it, I'm going to talk about the circumstantial evidence, the indirect evidence that strengthens the foundation for the resurrection. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, first explaining the empty tomb. And how do we explain the empty tomb? Well, did the disciples steal the body? Well, there are only 3 options, okay, about the disciples. Either they were telling the truth, they were the deceivers, or they were the deceived ones. Now, if they weren't telling the truth, they were either they were the deceived ones or the deceivers. Now, then, I will present 4 reasons why they could not be the deceivers. First, they died for their beliefs. No one dies for a lie. Okay? 2, their lives were absolutely transformed. 3, the origin of the Christian belief. Okay, they had no idea resurrection was possible, like I showed in my previous video. And 4, they had no motive whatsoever to proclaim it. You know what? I would argue that they would have every motive to deny the resurrection rather than proclaim it. What did they get out of proclaiming the resurrection? They got rejected, tortured, beaten, and killed. That's not a list of perks. Okay, so they weren't the deceivers, so they must have been the deceived ones, or they're telling the truth. If you're going to deny the resurrection, they would have to be the deceived ones. Okay, so how do we explain the empty tomb if the disciples didn't deceive people and steal the body? Well, in order to account for the empty tomb, you have to say some sort of an unknown party stole the body. Okay. Well, there are a couple problems with that. First, insufficient time. What is it? He died on Friday, then there was Saturday, then Sunday morning. Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. That's insufficient time to form a conspiracy. 2, no motive. What would be the motive for that unknown party to steal the body? I mean, think about it. Have you ever even thought about trying to steal a body, much less attempted to? No, of course not. What would be the motive of that unknown party to steal the body? Okay? 3, that's assuming that there was no guards in. And 4, if I were the unknown group, you know what I'd be like? I'd be like, okay, hey, enemies of Christianity, Jewish Pharisees. No, we got his body. We got Jesus' body. Okay? So these Christians, they're lying. Okay? Let's make a deal. I'll give you the body if you give me some money. Come on, it's a win-win situation. I get some money, you get to expose these frauds. And they would have accepted that in a heartbeat. And yet, that never happened. Okay? This can be summed up philosophically. 1, if an unknown party stole the body, they would probably have done that. 2, they didn't. Therefore, they probably did not steal the body. Okay? An unknown party did not steal the body. So how do you explain the empty tomb? How do you explain that, other than the resurrection? Okay, let's move on to the appearances of Jesus. Okay, what can explain the appearances of Jesus? Well, first week I already went over how the entire Jewish community believed everybody at the end times was going to resurrect. 2 things. A, the resurrection was going to occur at the end times, and 2, is going to occur to everybody, not just an isolated individual. So if they have a preconceived mindset that a resurrection wouldn't be possible for one person within history, how do you explain the appearances? Because not by hallucinations, because hallucinations are projections of the mind. Okay? If they had a mindset that it couldn't happen, it's not going to happen. Okay? So how do you explain these? Okay? How do you explain these appearances other than hallucinations? And 2, there were tons of people who claimed to see Jesus rise from the dead. There were tons of people. How do you explain? Were hundreds of people equally mistaken? The other way. So Another huge problem with the hallucination theory, or any subjective vision theory, is this, okay? Okay. It is interesting to note that during Jesus' time, the Jews distinguished between a vision and an appearance of an angel precisely on this basis. Okay, here's the basis. If the food seen to be eaten by the angel was left undisturbed, then the angel was just a vision. But if the food had been consumed, then the angel had actually appeared. With that in mind, we can see that the disciples could not have mistakenly taken a vision of Jesus for an appearance, for the basis of discriminating between a vision and an appearance was their physical reality. At any rate, the physicalism of Jesus' appearances is well established, and thus precludes there being any subjective visions, so to speak. Thus, even if they suffered from hallucinations, or subjective or visions, they would not have believed it anyway. That presents a huge problem, almost conclusive problem, to any hallucination or subjective vision type theory. Now we got that over with, let's go to the circumstantial evidence. What is the indirect evidence that points to the resurrection? Well, first of which is the conversion of skeptics. Okay, both James and Paul were skeptics. Actually, Paul hated the Christians and persecuted them. Okay, what could have forced him, or what could have made him change 180 degrees of his life from being the fiercest enemy of Christianity to being its best defender? And as well with James. I mean, do you think the resurrection had something to do with that? Maybe, I don't know. Okay. Second, some immediate changes to the Jewish social structures, okay? There were at least 3 things that the early Christians changed. And the thing about this is that this shows that they were absolutely convinced. Why? Because these these practices were considered to be given to them by God. So they risked eternal damnation if they changed them. Okay, here are some of the things. They stopped performing animal sacrifices. They stopped obeying the laws of Moses. They altered the day of Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. They altered the day of Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. What could have made them do that? And also some of the things that they instituted, some new things that they instituted, were things like communion and baptism, okay, which provides powerful circumstantial evidence for the resurrection. Okay, now then the third set of circumstantial evidence is the origin of the Christian faith. I mentioned before that they had no idea of a resurrection, so how do you explain that? How do you explain that other than the resurrection? The origin of the Christian faith? I don't know. But the most important circumstantial evidence, or strand of circumstantial evidence for the resurrection, is the emergence of the church. By the early 300s, which was right before Christianity became the main religion of the Roman Empire, there were approximately 30 million Christians. Approximately. That's about as many atheists there are in the entire United States of America. And you know what? America does not persecute atheists. How did Christianity become so big despite persistent brutal persecution? The Christians were always tortured for their faith, sometimes in unbelievable and gruesome ways. Now then, how did Christianity grow so fast when because of it Christians were tortured to death? The fact is that Christianity would have never spread like that if it wasn't the religion of the living God. I mean, come on. Has that ever happened to any other religion? Has any religion grew that fast when people were constantly persecuted for it? For the first 300 years, I challenge any skeptic to find one religion that for the first 300 years after its origin, it was under brutal persecution, and it was able to grow that fast. The only way it could have survived for 300 years of constant torture was that there was a divine being who made sure it would not die. I challenge any skeptic to find me another example where this occurred. Then and only then will I take your claim seriously that Jesus did not rise from the dead. As we have seen, the evidence for the resurrection is so overwhelming, from the empty tomb and the appearances of Jesus to the origin of the Christian faith and the circumstantial evidence. All provide and strengthen the foundation in which Christianity is based on, and that is the resurrection of Jesus. For let us not be foolish now, for the resurrection can no longer be denied, for you have no security against it.